Hello, hello, hello. All right. We are live. We are live. My name is SHAZZBARBARIC, SHAZZBARBARIC, and we are doing a little thing where Shaz runs for Congress and yeah, maybe president too. Let's try to save the world. Why not? No one else is doing it. It's low-hanging fruit. I woke up today and I was like, you know what? I could go for a run. I could go to the gym. I could write another book, maybe about some Buddhist Zen Buddhism wisdom. I can draw a picture. I can do so many things as Shaz, but why not try to save the world? Got my cup of coffee. All you need is a cup of coffee and a couple good ideas. My name is Shaz. I'm gonna try to save the world here. Shaz, running for Congress out of the 20th congressional district. Ways you can help. Spread the word. If you like what you see, if you don't like what you see, if you're intrigued, if you're curious, if you're confused, talk to someone about it. Venmo, send me $1. If you send me $5, I will give you a sticker. If you send me $1, still maybe give you a sticker. Let's just try to get stickers out there, but at a way that I don't have to pay for them. Reserve my books, 10bonepress.com, 10bonepress, TENBONEPRESS.com. Should take you to a Google form where you could reserve my books. You're not paying for anything right now. You're just promising to pay. Once I get enough promises to pay, I'll send out invoices and I'll actually submit a print order. I have a nice little publishing company. They're out of East Coast, somewhere around there, Ohio, I think. So central, east-ish. But they're an American company, smaller business. Been talking with them a couple of years. I would like them to print my books, but I need enough orders first. The first two we're going to do is Dow Day Shaz, TAOTESHAZZ.com, and Good Barracks, GOODBARICS.com. Good Barracks Manifesto, Dow Day Shaz. Two little spiritual books of wisdom to keep us calm on our journey. I did the protest thing. I did the other angry in the street. This is what democracy looks like. Well, we all shout in the street and yell at each other. That's not what democracy looks like. So let's keep the vibes chill because we have a lot of work ahead of us. We're at the base of a mountain that we're trying to climb. So we're going to keep our blood pressure down, our breathing calm, because there's a lot of work to be done. This is a part of that work, which is reading the Times, auditing our systems. This is auditing the information systems, using the New York Times as an example. We are on Wednesday. Wednesday. Where did I leave off? Right here. Wednesday, October 27th. We're going to try to do 2.5 days today, and then I have to leave my studio space. When you guys get me a real budget, I will get a real studio. But until then, I'm beholden to others. So today we have a short day in the studio, which is why I'm here at, what time is it right now, Shaz? So I woke up at 5, and right now it's 6. So it's a short, early day in the studio. It's okay. If I want to get ahead or catch up to the daily news, we're going to have to do a couple early days. So let's go. We're doing 6 to 9 today, maybe 9:30, but then definitely by 9:30, I got to get out of here. Got to get out of here so they can do other things that they do in the studio. Oh my gosh. Maybe the world would be saved with just a stronger cup of coffee, right? That's perfect, though. In Virginia's governor race, Biden barely rates a mention. I'm not commenting too much. We're just reading the Times. We're going to comment after we gather it all. Summary of the Times. It's about an hour a day. And then once I have it gathered into these auditable formats where we can pass it around, try to tease out the narratives, we will tease out the narratives. For weeks, Mr. McAuliffe has made little mention of President Biden, instead using his campaign rallies, media interviews, and millions of dollars in campaign advertising to make the race all about former President Donald J. Trump. In a way, Mr. Biden's campaign stopped with Mr. McAuliffe on a chilly Tuesday night as a part of a final week effort to energize Democratic voters, highlighted just how little the president has been present in the race at all, even as Congress worked feverishly to pass his legislative agenda. Mr. Biden focused his remarks on his predecessor, casting Mr. McAuliffe's Republican rival, Glenn Youngkin, a former private equity executive, as offering a hearty endorsement of Mr. Trump's bad ideas and bad record. How well do you know Terry's opponent? Mr. Biden asked a crowd gathering at a Northern Virginia park about 4 miles from the White House. The overriding factor in the environment is not Donald Trump, it's Biden's approval rating. Oh, that's someone else. Said Tucker Martin, a Republican strategist in Richmond who voted for Mr. Biden but plans to support Mr. Youngkin over Mr. McAuliffe. While Mr. Biden's victory at first inspired ginormous relief, she said, now there's a realization like, oh, yeah, Biden's not perfect and things aren't feeling enormously better. Neither Mr. McAuliffe nor Mr. Youngkin has mentioned Mr. Biden in his ads, according to Ad Impact, which tracks campaign commercials, underscoring how little he motivates voters in either party. A striking change after many years in which sitting presidents routinely played starring roles in advertisements by candidates in both parties. Mr. McAuliffe declined to run for president in April 2019 after a 3 hour dinner with Mr. Biden, during which the future president laid out his path to victory, one based on the same kind of consensus oriented platform that Mr. McAuliffe had envisioned for himself. This special election is testing Republican efforts to court Latino voters. Let's just get the coffee out of the way there. The contest for the vacant seat in the 118th District has exposed the vulnerabilities of a traditionally Democratic stronghold as Republicans make an all out effort to gain ground with Latino voters in South Texas. None of the three Democrats and two Republicans who ran in the special election received a majority of votes, leaving voters with one candidate from each party, both Latinos who were raised in the district. We have control and we are divided over who's too liberal and who's too that. We need to get back in line. The Republican candidate, John Lujan, a 59-year-old retired firefighter and former sheriff's deputy who now owns an IT firm, has campaigned on a platform of public safety and job creation. Martin Flores, 57, a longtime Republican who voted for Mr. Lujan, said it was time for a Republican to represent a growing conservative swath of Texas. In South Texas, where there have been some signs that the Republican Party is making headway with the Latino population, conservative operatives say they wanted to see the national polling numbers translate into votes for their candidates. The Republican National Committee now runs offices in San Antonio, McAllen, and Laredo, another border city, to court more Latino voters. Faster buses on Fifth Avenue? Not if business leaders get their way. On the agenda, the developers' concerns about Mr. de Blasio's plans to transform Fifth Avenue, New York City's most famous shopping corridor, into a thoroughfare that prioritizes buses over cars. Fifth Avenue's tourists are especially at risk. The Fifth Avenue project was supposed to have been completed before Mr. de Blasio left office, but the city announced last week that work would be put on hold until after the December holidays. The city's transportation commissioner, Hank Gutman, told reporters that the city did not want to risk interfering with the holiday season. Vernado Realty Trust, the self-described largest owner and manager of street retail in Manhattan, controls 2.7 million square feet of Manhattan real estate retail space, including storefronts along Fifth Avenue occupied by Harry Winston, Salvatore Ferragamo, and North Face. A spokesman for the MTA offered a thinly veiled criticism of the city's decision on the Fifth Avenue busway. In Vornado's slideshow presentation, which was obtained by the New York Times, the company argues that the city should continue to allow continuous car traffic down Fifth Avenue, but reduce the number of car lanes from 3 to 1. Danny Perlstein, a spokesman for Riders Alliance, an advocacy group for transit riders, said he was frustrated by the stalled Fifth Avenue busway and said that business leaders view the avenue primarily as a retail playground rather than a vital transportation corridor. 11 days after driveway killing, Texas man is arrested. On Friday, the Caldwell County Sheriff's Office said it had obtained an arrest warrant on October 21st for the Texas man Terry Turner, 65, in the killing of Adil Degoogie, 31. A grand jury is deciding whether to charge Mr. Turner. Larry D. Bloomquist, his lawyer, said in a telephone interview on Tuesday. In the 9/11 call, Mr. Turner told police that Mr. Degoogie had pointed a gun at him, the affidavit said. Mr. Degoogie ended up at Mr. Turner's house on Tina's Trail in Martindale, a drive between 7 to 10 minutes. A drive of between 7 to 10 minutes, according to the timeline provided by CAIR. According to the affidavit, Mr. Turner told the authorities that he woke up to use the bathroom, crossed the living room and foyer, saw the vehicle in the driveway with its lights off. The car lights then turned on. The driver reversed down the driveway, and Mr. Turner chased after it. The document said at the end of the driveway, Mr. Turner struck the driver's side window with his handgun and then fired, striking the victim, the affidavit said. Biden nominates Rosenworcel as FCC's first female lead. President Biden on Tuesday nominated Jessica Rosenworcel, the acting chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, to the permanent job, putting her on track to be the first woman to lead the agency. If Rosenworcel and the next member of the commission are not confirmed before the end of the year, Republicans could gain a de facto majority. In a recent letter to the White House, 33 Congresswomen endorsed Ms. Rosenworcel as an experienced FCC official who has spoken openly about how working mothers can be policy leaders. She and her husband, Mark I. Balin, a media lawyer at Baker Hostetler, married in 2000 and live with their 2 children in Washington. An FCC spokeswoman confirmed that that Miss Rosenworcel knew her husband would contact the Times about the article. There are a bunch of examples like this, and fundamentally, that's a political choice for the White House. As an acting chairwoman, Ms. Rosenworcel has pursued politically uncontroversial initiatives on the evenly split commission, targeting robocalls and working on measures to help wireless networks better withstand severe weather. In 2018, while serving on the commission, Ms. Rosenworcel spoke to the National Association of Broadcasters, rallying journalists against Mr. Trump's attack on news media. America's crumbling global position. The Biden administration is still desperate to get Iran back to the negotiating table to sign a nuclear deal that would free up billions of dollars in funding that Tehran can use to conduct more such attacks. Around the same time, Biden announced that now is the time to de-escalate. It would seem his Russian counterpart doesn't agree. Biden has claimed repeatedly that the United States has a treaty obligation to come to Taiwan's defense in the event of attack. Most recently at his CNN town hall last week, relations with allies, President Biden says he hears no criticism from America's allies about the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan and the collapse of the government. The Times' Stephen Erlinger reported in August. The economy. In July, the president dismissed price increases as expected and expected to be temporary. Current headline in the Times, rising prices. You know what? I pass these news articles through a summary filter, and sometimes they get jumbled. I think this one's a little jumbled, but we'll see. If we get stuff that isn't readable, I'll rethink my processes. Rising prices, blah, blah, blah. Even the administration's once genuine strategic accomplishment, the U.S., British, Australian nuclear submarine deal, signed at France's expense, was botched. All of them ultimately lie at the feet of the president. A painful reminder, as former Defense Secretary Robert Gates said pithily in 2014, that Biden has a long history of being on the wrong side of major foreign policy and national security issues. Biden and Mother Nature have reshaped the Middle East. Our friend Mr. Suck It himself, Thomas Friedman. President Barack Obama's pullback from the region and President Donald Trump's refusal to retaliate against Iran after it sent a wave of drone strikes to attack a key Saudi oil facility in 2019, were the warning signs that America had grown weary of intervening and refereeing in the Middle East sectarian wars. For the first time in a decade, King Abdullah of Jordan recently took a phone call from Assad. The Jordanian palace said they discussed relations between the two brotherly countries. Egypt and Jordan want to try to wean Syria and Iraq, the twin pillars of the Arab state system, away from Shiite Iran. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE even took their relations with Turkey out of the deep freeze, hoping to bring it back into the regional fold as a Sunni counterweight to Iran. Iran is probably thinking that the United States, while it will maintain sanctions, has lost any stomach for military action to curb Tehran's push to enrich enough uranium to become a threshold nuclear weapon state. The U.S. is not pulling out entirely, but it is pulling back. And all of its Sunni Arab partners are now acting to protect themselves and to stabilize the region in an era when the U.S. will no longer be dominant there, argued Martin Indyk, a longtime U.S. envoy to the Middle East, whose new book, Master of the Game, Henry Kissinger and the Art of Middle East Diplomacy, is a gripping history of how the United States used peacemaking to supplant the Soviet Union as the dominant foreign power in the region. In Mother Nature's Middle East, leaders will be judged not by how much they resist one another or great powers, but how much resilience they build for their people and nations at a time when the world will be phasing out fossil fuels, at a time when all the Arab Muslim states have booming populations under the age of 30, and at a time of intensifying climate change. Oh, Thomas Friedman. Don't read the news, Shaz. Don't comment. But that guy, there's a couple people who I would love to dig into the record. And that guy, he is a guy. He is a guy. Oh, Thomas, let us talk. Beyond Zuckerberg, let's cut to the chase. Who's going to replace Mark Zuckerberg as CEO of Facebook? Before you go, whoa there, Kara, let me just say that the horse is already out of the barn, whether the famed entrepreneur knows it yet or not. Because of his controlling stock, Zuckerberg will continue to wield all the real power at Facebook for as long as he wants. The endless stream of internal employee communications contained in the many thousands of documents provided by the whistleblower Frances Haugen makes clear that a number of rank and file Facebookers have had it. While past accusations that Facebook and Zuckerberg care about profits and growth over safety sometimes fell flat, Wall Street certainly hasn't had a problem with the company. Its message that's less easily ignored. It's a message that's less easily ignored now. As Zuckerberg's longtime number two, she's the Icarus of Facebook. Putting her in the main seat will not fix what's broken at the company or signal to a now impatient line of regulators that Facebook is ready to change. Face it, Facebook won't change until advertisers demand it. One overarching theme of the coverage, prompted by the meeting out of tens of thousands of pages of internal documents by former employee and whistleblower Frances Haugen, is that Facebook's business priorities trump user privacy and safety. Facebook, Ms. Haugen told the Senate this month, knows how to remedy many of its problems, but won't make the necessary changes because they have put their astronomical profits before people. The Washington Post this week detailed how Facebook's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, often overruled researchers' concerns and suggestions in pursuit of growth. Facebook, of course, denies this, noting an investment of $13 billion and 40,000 employees to do one job: keep people safe on Facebook. Why doesn't this spiraling public relations crisis matter? Facebook simply hasn't been compelled to change its behavior. Until advertisers start paring back their spending on Facebook, Congress, Ms. Haugen, and the press are bumps in the road. Why would Pfizer or Nike walk away? Facebook is where their buyers are. It's where Pfizer can ensure that drug marketing will be seen by 40-something rheumatoid arthritis sufferers. On a day when at least a dozen stories critical of Facebook published and Ms. Haugen appeared before British Parliament urging tighter tech regulation, Mr. Zuckerberg began his prepared earnings remarks lamenting the impact of Apple's iPhone privacy changes on Facebook's ad business. Of course, pulling advertising from, say, Janine Pirro's or Tucker Carlson's cable news talk show is not the same as cutting ties with some 3.6 billion people who use Facebook and its other apps. End the secrecy. Open up adoption records. We continue to keep the process of finding one's birth family and opening birth records as difficult as possible, as with Sam Anthony profiled in your article. We are preventing valuable family connections that should be a basic human right. Adoptees are often completely cut off from our birth families the second our adoption papers are finalized. Adoptees should not have to go to great lengths to reconnect with their birth family. When birth records are sealed, adoptees suffer in order to uphold an archaic standard that was meant to shroud adoption in secrecy to prevent shame. Stephen Inskeep, March 28th essay, I Was Denied My Birth Story, revealed his fury about not knowing the story of how I came to live on this earth. Strangers hid part of me from myself. Lisa Belkin reviewed Gabrielle Glaser's book, American Baby, another tragic tale about when adoptions are closed. How many tragic tales do we have to hear to understand that birth parents, adoptive families, and adoptees need to know each other? How many children must lie awake at night wondering why they were given away? How many adoptees do not know their genetic history? The solution is easy. Open adoption, which birth parents and adoptive families choose each other and stay in touch through social media, texts, photos, and visits. Rising prices, once seen as temporary, threaten Biden's agenda. The conversations are aimed at one goal: taming accelerating price increases that are hurting the economic recovery, unsettling American consumers, and denting Mr. Biden's popularity. An inflation surge is presenting a fresh challenge for Mr. Biden, who for months insisted that rising prices were a temporary hangover from the pandemic recession and would quickly recede. Mr. Biden has tried to make the case that the investments in his spending bill will moderate price increases over time. During CNN town hall last week, Mr. Biden conceded the limits of his power, saying, I don't have a near term answer for bringing down gas prices, which he said does not expect to begin dropping until next year. Intern scarcity has caused the price of many things to go higher as inflation remains stubbornly high. Republicans have turned price spikes into a weapon against Mr. Biden's economic policies, warning that more spending could exacerbate the pain for everyday Americans. Missing foreign workers add to hiring challenge. She received approval documents for her renewed work authorization, enabling her to return to the labor force. Hundreds of thousands of foreign workers have gone missing from the labor market as the global coronavirus. Just one second. We're good. Just making sure things are working. As the global coronavirus pandemic drags on, leaving holes in white collar professionals like the one Miss Mahajan works in, and in more service oriented jobs in beach towns and at ski resorts. Employers consistently complain that they are struggling to hire, and job openings exceed the number of people actively looking for work, even though millions fewer people are working compared with just before the pandemic. Companies dependent on foreign workers have found that waves of infections and processing delays at consulates are keeping would-be employers in their home countries or stuck in America, but simply unable to work. It's going to take a long time for them to work through the backlog. Worker inflows have already slowed sharply before the pandemic, the result of a crackdown by the Trump administration that made it harder for foreign workers, refugees, and migrant family members to enter the United States. Often, immigrants work jobs that struggle to attract native workers. Mhm. Almost done with this day. The bond market says inflation will last. You should be listening. So Biden says inflation won't last. The bond market says it will last. Let's see who's right. Despite some of the fastest price increases in decades, investors in the Treasury bond market, who are keenly attuned to inflation, have been steadfast in their belief that it was a temporary phenomenon. How investors are positioning themselves influences how Fed policymakers think, he said, because those who are putting forward their opinions have skin in the game. While the Fed chairman, Jerome H. Powell, and other central bank officials have spent months saying higher inflation was a transitory result of the pandemic driven supply chain problems. There's lately been good reason to believe that price rises could be more lasting concerns. The consumer price index reading for September released last week showed prices climbing 5.4% from the previous year and slightly faster than they grew in August. Last week, a report on wholesale used car prices, which has become a closely watched indicator of inflation on Wall Street, showed the prices that dealers pay to stock their lots were surging. Once again, expectations of rising inflation can become a kind of self fulfilling prophecy. So the Fed has been inclined to raise interest rates or tighten monetary policy when public opinion anticipates higher prices. In turn, scarcity has caused the price of many things to go higher as inflation remains stubbornly high. I love it when they conflate public opinion with actual. Anyways, don't comment, Shaz. Just read. YouTube, Snap, and TikTok executives take their turn answering to Washington. Miss- oh, I put him backwards. No, we're good. In a hearing that lasted more than 3 hours, a bipartisan group of senators told executives from YouTube, Snap, and TikTok that they were worried the company's software steered young people towards inappropriate pros, mishandled consumer data, and did not do enough to spot dangerous content on their platforms. Lawmakers repeatedly said that their staff had been able to find harmful content, including posts related to self harm and pornography, inside the company's products, sometimes while logged in as a teenage user. The tough questions reflect the growing pressure from the nation's largest social media companies to shield children who use their products from content that exposes them to violence or danger or diminished their self-worth. The pressure has increased sharply in the last 2 weeks after Frances Haugen, the former Facebook product manager who leaked thousands of pages of internal documents, told the committee how the company knew that its products made some teenagers feel worse about themselves. The leak of internal documents by a former Facebook employee has provided an intimate look at the operations of the secretive social media company and renewed calls for better regulation of the company's wide reach into the lives of its users. During an interview with 60 Minutes that aired on October 3rd, Frances Haugen, a Facebook product manager who left the company in May, revealed that she was responsible for the leak of those internal documents. Britain moves to attract financing for nuclear plants. The British government said on Tuesday it would introduce legislation enabling a form of financing for nuclear power stations that it hopes will attract investors willing to put up billions of pounds to build new facilities. The government's move, which would require consumers to help pay for these plants as they are being built, is expected to provide a green light for a long delayed new nuclear station northeast of London, estimated to cost $20 billion. The government has been under growing pressure to build at least one more nuclear facility to replace the aging fleet of 8 nuclear plants that generate about 16% of the country's overall electric power. Many of these plants are expected to close in the coming years, leaving the British electricity network short of a steady flow of power that nuclear plants provide. A state owned company, China General Nuclear, is a minority partner in both the proposed Sizewell plant and the one under construction in Hinkley Point. The new system has great potential for lowering costs, providing that a robust regulatory mechanism is in place to ensure that the potential for cost overruns is minimized, said Vincent C. Zabielski, a London based special counsel who works on nuclear issues at Pillsbury, a law firm. Netflix eyes New Jersey Army base for major production hub. Netflix wants to turn a crumbling army base in New Jersey into one of the largest movie and television production hubs in the Northeast, a plan that has at least one important proponent, Governor Phil Murphy. At nearly 300 acres, the Jersey Shore site would be Netflix's second largest production complex behind ABQ Studios in New Mexico. Speculation about Netflix's interest in Fort Monmouth has swirled since July, when the Two River Times reported that Netflix has been in contact with Mr. Murphy's office about building opportunities. New Jersey's officials began playing up their state as economically and politically friendly to Netflix in 2019 when a delegation from Mr. Murphy's administration visited various Hollywood companies in Los Angeles. Netflix alone has filmed more than 30 projects in New Jersey since 2018, including Army of the Dead, Zack Snyder's Zombies in Vegas extravaganza. A Netflix spokesman said the company would continue to shoot in states like New York, Georgia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina, even if Fort Monmouth plans came to fruition. As risks of climate change rise, investors seek greener buildings. The Green Building Council has promoted more efficient development for nearly 3 decades through LEED, its standard for building sustainability. Increasingly dire reports of more frequent natural disasters like the flooding and harsh winds of Hurricane Ida, which caused an estimated 27 billion to 40 billion in property damage in late August and early September, according to the data firm CoreLogic, have hammered home the realization that climate change is affecting real estate much sooner than expected. On October 15th, President Biden, who has made various climate proposals central to his Build Back Better agenda, released a strategy to seek more financial disclosures from publicly traded companies on climate risk in an effort to help steer investors toward more resilient assets. The company is betting that sustainable development means attracting better tenants and getting ahead of regulation to create a more valuable asset, which draws more investors. The alphabet soup of standards like LEED and GRESB can be confusing, and many see the lack of common guidelines and technology as an issue, fueling a widespread belief that the market pool of more disclosures can be a more effective means of cutting carbon than heavy handed regulations alone. More sustainable buildings attract higher quality tenants and allow for higher rents, up to 10% more, according to a study of London office space by JLL. More accurate tools and data make it increasingly easier for asset managers and investors to compare properties, portfolios, and performance. All right, three more. FDA panel recommends COVID shots for children aged 5 to 11. An expert committee advising the Food and Drug Administration on Tuesday recommended that regulators authorize Pfizer BioNTech's coronavirus vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds, bringing about 28 million children, a major step closer to becoming eligible for shots. Public demand for a pediatric vaccine has been high, and some panel members said that even though young children are less likely to get severely ill from COVID 19, parents and doctors alike are anxious to protect them. Dr. Jay Portnoy, a medical director at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri, said he had seen critically ill children in the intensive care unit and terrified parents. While some committee members said they wished to recommend the vaccine for a more narrow group of children, they were asked to decide simply whether the benefits of a pediatric shot outweighed the risks. Dr. Paul Offit, a panel member who heads a vaccine education center at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, said it was nerve-wracking to make public health decisions affecting millions of children based on studies involving just a few thousand participants. COVID-19 hospitalization rates in the 5 to 11 age group are 3 times as high for Black, Hispanic, and Native American children as for whites, Dr. Haver said. Moderna agrees to sell up to 110 million COVID vaccine doses to African countries, facing pressure for keeping its COVID vaccine out of reach for poorer countries. Moderna said on Tuesday it has agreed to sell up to 110 million shots to African Union member nations. Moderna has been sharply criticized for not sharing its vaccine recipe or transferring its technology to manufacturers in poor countries that could make its shots for local markets. The FDA has authorized booster shots for millions of recipients of the Pfizer BioNTech, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. Two officials in the Biden administration said the United States has agreed for some of its Moderna doses to be delivered several months later than planned, so that Moderna could first supply the 15 million doses to the African Union. Talks are continuing about Moderna potentially supplying more shots to poor countries through other channels. One of the administration officials said Moderna did not say how much it was charging for the deal
with the African Union, but two people involved in the negotiations said the deal was for doses at $7 per shot. And the last article for the day. Days away from its deadline, Tyson Foods reaches a 96% vaccination rate. Nearly 3 months after Tyson Foods mandated coronavirus vaccines for all of its 120,000 U.S. workers, more than 96% of them are vaccinated, the company's chief executive, Donnie King, said in an employee memo on Tuesday. Less than half of Tyson's workforce was inoculated when it was announced on August 3rd that it would require vaccines. As a part of this effort, Tyson negotiated an agreement with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, which represents several thousand of its workers, to endorse the mandate in return for more benefits for all its workers, like paid sick leave. Working together, UFCW and Tyson set a new standard with this vaccine mandate and have proved what's possible when we listen to workers and negotiate the implementation of vaccination mandates fairly and responsibly. Mr. Perone said in a statement, we urge every company across this country to do what is right by their frontline workers and work cooperatively with their unions and employees to help end this pandemic and keep all of America's essential workers and their families safe, he added. If you change your mind and want to rejoin Tyson, let us know. Our doors are always open. The results of Tyson's vaccine mandate will be examined closely by other companies as well as federal and local officials as they weigh their own approaches to vaccine mandates. And that has been Reading the Times, part two for Wednesday, October 27th. Reading the Times, part two for Wednesday, October 27th, 2021. Be back in a minute with Thursday's New York Times.